Have you ever wanted to disappear? Not to die, but to vanish for a few days. To go somewhere where nobody demands anything from you, nobody judges you, nobody expects anything from you. To just breathe, without weight, without pain, without a mask. Perhaps you feel exactly this way right now. Tired, worn out, trying to appear strong when, inside, everything is broken. And you know what's worse? The feeling that nobody understands. That if you spoke about what you really feel, people would say you're being dramatic, lacking faith, making a fuss. But what if I told you that someone has felt exactly what you're feeling right now, and that someone was Jesus? Yes, the same Jesus who performed miracles, who healed the blind, who multiplied loaves, also had days when he cried, when he felt afraid, when his soul was so distressed that he even sweat blood. Perhaps you've never heard this in a sermon, but it's in the Bible, and it's real. Jesus also went through darkness, and that's why what he did in the face of sadness can transform your life. It's not just about religion. It's not about going to church or having more faith. It's about understanding that the pain you feel today has already been felt by the one who came into the world to save you. And more than that, Jesus didn't run from sadness. He faced it. He cried. He prayed. He felt alone. And even so, he chose to continue. In this video, you'll walk through the darkest moments of Jesus' life, and perhaps for the first time, you'll realize that your pain is part of something much greater than you imagine. You'll discover that Jesus knows what it's like to feel betrayed. Jesus knows what it's like to be ignored by friends. Jesus knows what it's like to speak to God and not hear an immediate response. Jesus knows what it's like to wake up with a heavy heart and go to sleep with a soul in silence. And he doesn't just know, he overcame it. This video isn't meant to entertain you. It's to remind you that there is hope. Not a magical hope that makes everything disappear, but a real hope. One that is born even in the midst of pain. And before you think, but I'm too weak, I can't be like Jesus, let me tell you something. Jesus never expected you to be strong. He just wants you to trust, even when everything falls apart, even when nothing makes sense. Because that's exactly how he lived his last days here on earth. And that's exactly why he can understand you like no one else can. Today you'll see the side of Jesus that few show. Not the Jesus of golden altars, but the Jesus who cried in the dark, who cried out with a torn soul, and who even so chose to continue loving. And later on, when the video is coming to an end, I'll present something to you. Something simple, but something that can help you transform your pain into strength. That can show you in practice how to follow Jesus' footsteps, even when everything seems lost. But that's only at the end. For now, take a deep breath. Try to forget the notifications, the noises around you, the day's commitments. Just listen, because perhaps today, you didn't find this video by chance. Perhaps Jesus is calling you back, and if you accept this call, I promise, this story will change how you see your pain. Have you ever felt suffocated by your own mind? As if your heart was so heavy that breathing becomes difficult? As if your soul was screaming inside but no one could hear? As if you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders but no one could see it? It's the kind of pain that doesn't show up on medical tests. You can't see it in the mirror, but it crushes everything inside. It drains your strength. It steals your hope. This pain has a name. It might be deep sadness, anxiety, depression, burnout, existential anguish, or that inexplicable emptiness that insists on staying, even when everything around you seems normal. Perhaps you live with this every day, and perhaps you've never told anyone, because it seems no one would understand. Or worse, they might say it's a lack of faith, that you should pray more, that if you had true faith, you wouldn't feel this way. But what if I told you that Jesus, yes, Jesus himself, and already felt this before you? Yes, the same Jesus who healed the sick, raised the dead, and fed multitudes, also went through a dark night of the soul, a night when the Son of God himself felt the crushing weight of fear, anguish, and emotional pain, a night when even the Creator of the universe experienced what it means to feel too human. This night happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane wasn't just any place. It was a garden, an olive grove, a quiet space. It was the place where olives were pressed until their precious oil flowed out, a perfect symbol for what would happen there, because that night, it became the stage for the deepest anguish anyone could experience, the place where the Son of God would be pressed by pain until his purest essence was revealed. Jesus knew what was about to happen. He knew he would be betrayed with a kiss, the universal symbol of affection. He knew he would be abandoned by friends who had sworn loyalty. He knew he would be denied 3 times by Peter, his most fervent disciple. He knew he would be publicly humiliated. He knew he would be flogged until his skin tore. He knew he would be crowned with thorns that would pierce his skull. He knew he would carry a cross through the streets of Jerusalem while being spat upon and ridiculed. He knew he would be nailed to that cross, naked, exposed, slowly suffocating. He knew he would die in the most painful and shameful way the Roman Empire had created. And still, he went there. He went to pray. He went to face what many of us spend our lives trying to avoid, feeling. Yes, Jesus chose to feel everything, while many of us flee from pain, distract our minds, dive into addictions, hide behind forced smiles, numb ourselves with medications, lose ourselves in screens and endless distractions. He went straight to the center of suffering. He plunged into the abyss. He embraced the darkness. In the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 26, verse 38, he says to his disciples, "My soul is deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." Do you realize the power of these words? Deeply grieved, to death. Jesus is saying that the pain was so great, it felt like it would kill him, that the anguish was so suffocating, he felt like he was dying inside, that the weight was so unbearable, his soul was being crushed. And you know what's most striking? He said this out loud. He didn't pretend to be strong when he was weak. He didn't hide behind catchy phrases. He didn't disguise his suffering with a smile. He wasn't ashamed of his pain. Jesus, God incarnate himself, admitted that he was broken inside. And there, in that silent garden, he did what many of us avoid. He prayed, not to ask for blessings, not to thank for miracles, not to fulfill a religious obligation, but to beg for relief, to plead for that cup to pass, to call for help when his humanity reached its limit. Matthew chapter 26 verse 39 says, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." This is one of the most powerful phrases in human history. Jesus isn't making a beautiful speech to impress. He isn't reciting memorized verses. He isn't performing spirituality. He is crying out. He is screaming from the depths of his soul. He is saying in tears, "Father, and I can't bear this. It hurts too much. Please, if possible, deliver me." Have you felt that? Have you prayed like this? Have you begged for relief when no one was watching? Have you fallen to your knees asking for the pain to pass? Perhaps you're living that prayer right now, asking for the pain to pass, for the loneliness to end, for anxiety to give you a break, for depression to release its grip, for life to make some sense amid the chaos. Jesus has been through this, and no, he wasn't spared. The cup didn't pass, the pain didn't magically disappear, but he was sustained, strengthened, empowered to continue, because even after saying, "Father, if it is possible," he completes, "Yet not as I will, but as you will." This isn't passive resignation. It's not giving up. It's courage in its purest state. It's true faith when everything screams to give up. It's the confidence of someone who knows that pain can have a purpose, that suffering can have meaning, that even the darkest night can prepare the way for a dawn. But there's another detail in this story that many ignore, and that perhaps is what connects most with your reality today. While Jesus was sweating blood, his friends were sleeping. He had asked them to stay with him, to keep watch, to pray, to simply be present, to not leave him alone in that moment of terror. But they didn't understand the gravity of the situation. They were tired, distracted, indifferent, unable to realize they were witnessing the most vulnerable moment of the most important man in history. Luke, chapter 22, verse 45 says, "When he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping from sorrow." Have you ever needed someone, and that person wasn't there? Have you ever begged for support and received silence? Have you tried to talk about your pain, but realized no one really wanted to listen? Have you felt that even surrounded by people, you were completely alone? Jesus understands, because he lived exactly that. In his darkest moment, he was alone. The friends who said they would be with him until the end fell asleep. The disciples who witnessed his miracles collapsed from exhaustion. Those who promised loyalty failed the most important test, and soon after, one of them, Judas, came with a kiss to deliver him to his enemies. A kiss, the symbol of love transformed into betrayal, an embrace that became handcuffs, a gesture of intimacy that turned into a death sentence. The Gospel according to Luke chapter 22 verse 44 reveals something even more frightening. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. This isn't poetry. It's not a metaphor. It's not exaggeration for impact. This is real. Scientifically, this condition exists. It's called hematidrosis. It happens when the level of stress and anguish is so extreme that the blood vessels around the sweat glands rupture. The sweat mixes with blood. The body literally bleeds through the pores of the skin. In other words, Jesus' body went into emotional collapse. His nervous system was so overloaded by the terror of what was to come. His mind was so crushed by the weight of the mission. His heart was so pressed by the pain that his body began to disintegrate. He was at the limit, at the extreme of pain, at rock bottom, in the darkest valley. And even so, he didn't run away. He didn't rebel. He didn't curse heaven. He didn't give up. He continued, step by step, breath by breath, prayer by prayer. He endured, resisted, persevered. And why is this so important to you today? Because it means that Jesus isn't someone distant. He isn't a God indifferent to human pain. He isn't a celestial being who observes your suffering from afar. He isn't an impatient judge waiting for you to just get over your depression. He is a God who chose to feel what you feel, who knows from his own experience the terror of sleepless nights, who understands the crushing weight of anxiety, who has experienced the darkness of depression. And this changes everything. We all have our Gethsemane. It might be the dark room where you cry in hiding, the hospital where you wait for news you fear receiving, the workplace where you smile on the outside and die on the inside, the bed where you toss at night unable to sleep, while tormenting thoughts give no respite, the bathroom where you lock yourself so no one sees your tears, the car where you scream in silence before entering your home pretending everything is fine, the doctor's office where you received a diagnosis that changed everything, the phone where you got the message that destroyed your dreams. Your Gethsemane might have another name, but the pain is the same. And Jesus knows exactly how it feels. He was there. He sweat blood there. He cried there. He begged there. He felt abandoned there. And it was there, in the moment of greatest anguish, that the salvation of humanity began. Gethsemane wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the plan. It was the first step of the journey that would change the destiny of all of us. Your pain can also be the beginning of something new, not because you're strong enough, not because you'll never break, not because you have all the answers, but because you're not alone. Jesus understands. Jesus has been where you are. Jesus would cry with you if he were physically here. Jesus wouldn't tell you to just have more faith. Jesus would hold your hand in the darkness. And perhaps, just perhaps, what he did on that dark night will change how you face the dark nights of your life. Because if even Jesus needed help to carry his cross, you can also ask for help. If even Jesus expressed his pain, you can also talk about yours. If even Jesus begged for relief, you can also cry out. And if even Jesus continued even when he felt no strength, maybe you can also take just one more step today. Just one more. Because after Gethsemane, after the cross, after death came resurrection, and after your dark night, and no matter how long it seems, and dawn will come. But before that dawn, Jesus would face something even more devastating than Gethsemane, something that perhaps you know intimately well, the pain of total abandonment. Few things are as destructive as the loneliness within the soul. It's different from being alone in a place. True loneliness is when you're surrounded by people, but feel that nobody really sees you. It's like screaming in a full room and not being heard. It's like suffocating inside, while on the outside everyone thinks everything is fine. It's feeling like a stranger even in the midst of your own family. It's being in a crowd and still feeling completely invisible. It's smiling in a photo while inside you're in pieces. And the worst part is that often we get used to this. We learn to live with this emptiness, put a smile on our face, pretend to be strong, say, "I'm fine" when someone asks how you are, learn to perform normality. But inside, you're broken into 1,000 pieces. Perhaps you're living exactly this right now, and you don't even need words to explain. Just the silence of your heart, that mute scream that no one else hears. But there's something you need to hear today. Jesus has lived this silence too. Not once, not for a few minutes, not as a temporary experiment, but for entire days, during the most important moments of his life. Imagine this. You love people, teach, forgive, walk alongside them, trust, share meals, stories, dreams, give your time, your knowledge, your heart, invest years of your life in these people, and suddenly, they turn their backs, all of them. all at once, precisely when you need them most. Jesus lived this. Judas, one of his closest friends, betrayed him with a kiss, not a knife in the back, not an anonymous letter. A kiss, the universal symbol of affection and loyalty, transformed into betrayal. Peter, the one who swore loyalty unto death, denied him 3 times before dawn. "I don't know him," said the man who had promised to die for Jesus just hours earlier. The other disciples, who saw miracles with their own eyes, who ate at his table, who swore to follow him to the end, fled in fear, disappeared into the darkness of night while he was dragged to unjust courts. Alone. Literally, alone. In one of the worst moments of his life, when every fiber of his being screamed for company, when his humanity begged for a word of comfort. And this wasn't a surprise. Jesus knew it would be like this. In the Gospel according to John, chapter 13, verse 21, it is written, "After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in spirit, and testified, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me.'" Jesus knew from the beginning, knew that he would be abandoned, knew that he would be forgotten, knew that he would be denied by those he loved most. But even so, he loved until the end. Even knowing he would be betrayed, he washed Judas's feet. Even foreseeing the denial, he called Peter Rock. Even anticipating their flight, he gave his body and blood to the disciples at the Last Supper. The pain of abandonment is one of the cruelest pains a person can feel, especially when it comes from someone close, someone you trusted with your most intimate secrets, someone who said they would never leave you, someone who promised to be by your side, in joy and in sorrow. And when this happens, the soul bleeds, not a visible bleeding, not a wound that can be bandaged, but a deep tear in the fabric of your being, an internal hemorrhage of hope. You might try to be strong, you might smile in public, you might say, "Everything is fine," you might pretend you don't care, but inside the feeling is of having been left to your own fate. It's as if you were standing at the edge of an abyss, and the people you loved most had turned their backs, as if you were screaming for help, and everyone simply kept walking, as if your heart was torn apart, and nobody stopped to help pick up the pieces. Jesus understands this, not theoretically, not as a distant concept, but as experience lived in his own skin, because he too was left aside, abandoned, forgotten, betrayed. And if you've ever felt that nobody cares, that nobody is really there for you, that all smiles are superficial, that all promises are empty, remember, Jesus felt this too, and even so, he continued, step by step, breath by breath, tear by tear. Anxiety is not just a modern problem. It's not just the result of social networks, constant notifications, and accelerated lives. It has always existed, since the first human feared the unknown future, since the first person woke up in the middle of the night with a racing heart. And in the Bible we see this clearly, especially in Jesus' life. In Gethsemane, as we saw in the previous block, Jesus was not just sad, he was agonizing, overwhelmed by a terror so deep that no human word could adequately describe it. And more than that, he sweat drops of blood, which only happens when the body collapses from extreme tension, when the nervous system is so overloaded that it begins to fail, when the mind is so distressed that the body literally breaks down. He knew what he was about to face, knew that he would be beaten until his skin tore, knew that he would be humiliated in front of crowds, knew that he would be crucified, the slowest and most painful death ever invented by man. But do you know what the real weight was? What really made Jesus sweat blood? The separation from the Father. Because at that moment Jesus, who always had perfect communion with God, felt that heaven was silent, that constant presence that had accompanied him since eternity, that voice that had always guided him in every step, that love that was the foundation of his existence, suddenly seemed distant, inaccessible, silent. He felt the emptiness, felt the absence, felt the pain of carrying the sin of the entire world, alone, felt the weight of becoming for a moment the incarnation of everything that was contrary to his divine nature. And anxiety took over, not a mild anxiety, not a passing worry, but an absolute existential terror, a fear that consumed every cell of his body. Jesus didn't despair, didn't panic, didn't run away, but he felt deeply, felt with every fiber of his being. The anguish was real, the expectation of pain was crushing, the near future seemed like a bottomless black abyss. Perhaps you're experiencing something similar. Perhaps you don't know exactly what's distressing you, but your chest tightens as if an invisible hand were squeezing your heart. Your mind doesn't stop, spinning in the same thoughts like a hamster on a wheel. Sleep doesn't come, even when your body begs for rest. Your heart beats fast for no apparent reason. Your breathing becomes short and shallow. Your hands shake. Your stomach turns. The world seems like a hostile and threatening place. It's anxiety, and you're not alone in this silent battle. You're not exaggerating. You're not making things up. You're not just needing to relax. Jesus went through this. The creator of the universe himself knew the terror of anxiety in its purest form, and he overcame it, but not with magic formulas, not with self-help phrases, not with superficial relaxation techniques. He overcame with faith and surrender, with total surrender, even when everything inside him wanted to run away, with confidence in the greater purpose, even when he couldn't see the end of the tunnel. In the most dramatic moment of all, when Jesus was already hanging on the cross, with his body torn by whips, wrists and feet pierced by crude nails, eyes blurred by pain and mouth dry from dehydration, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This phrase is recorded in the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. It is the climax of human loneliness. It is the lowest possible point. It is the moment when even Jesus himself feels that not even God is listening. It is the final abyss of existence, feeling abandoned not only by men, but by heaven itself. And perhaps you've asked this same question, God, why? Why me? Why this illness? Why this abandonment? Why this depression that doesn't go away? Why this anxiety that gives me no respite? Why does it seem that the Lord has abandoned me? Why do my prayers seem to hit the ceiling and come back? Why is everything so dark? Why does silence seem to be the only answer? It's hard to admit this, especially in religious environments where you're expected to always have joy in the Lord, where expressing doubt is seen as a lack of faith, where admitting sadness is considered almost heresy. But it's real. The Bible doesn't hide this cry of abandonment. God's word doesn't censor this moment of total darkness. It shows Jesus, the Son of God, feeling what you feel, screaming what you scream in the silence of your soul, asking what you ask on sleepless nights, because he didn't just come to teach, didn't just come to perform miracles, didn't just come to be worshipped. He came to live what we live, feel what we feel, cry our tears, bleed our blood, so that when you reach this point in your life, when the darkness seemed so dense that you couldn't even see your own hand in front of your face, you would know that you're not crazy, that you're not lost beyond salvation, that you're not abandoned, even when it seems like you are, and that yes, someone has already gone through this and overcame. You may try to describe your pain, but words always seem insufficient. They always seem too small to contain the ocean of anguish inside your chest, and nobody really understands. People try to help, but they say the wrong words. It will pass. Everyone feels this way sometimes. Try to think positively. Pray more. There are people going through worse things. Or worse, they distance themselves, ignore, judge, because deep pain is uncomfortable, because depression isn't pretty to see, because chronic anxiety tires those around you, because prolonged suffering tests even the strongest relationships. But not Jesus. He doesn't back away from your pain. He doesn't feel uncomfortable with your tears. He doesn't cover his ears to your silent screams. He doesn't just understand, he has felt it. He has gone through it. He has lived every second of this agony. He didn't turn his face away, didn't pretend not to see, didn't ask you to be strong when you can barely breathe. And today he looks at you, not with judgment, not with impatience, not with disappointment, but with compassion, with deep understanding, with love that intimately knows your pain. In the book of Hebrews chapter 4 verse 15 it is written, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." In other words, Jesus knows what it's like, not theoretically, not from having read about it, but from his own visceral and painful experience. Jesus understands your weakness, understands when you can't fight anymore, understands when you just want the pain to stop, understands when you wonder if it's worth continuing. Jesus isn't scandalized by your pain, isn't shocked by your darkest thoughts, isn't horrified by your bitterest tears, and he doesn't walk away, doesn't get tired of you, doesn't give up when the fight is long. He draws near. He enters the darkness with you. He sits beside you on the cold floor of depression. He extends his hand, not to forcefully pull you out of the pit, but to hold your broken heart with gentleness. He reminds you, you are not alone. I am here. I went through this, and I went through it for you. I know this darkness. I understand this emptiness. I felt this abandonment, and I am still here. Yes, the pain is real. Anxiety can crush you like a ton of concrete. Depression can drain all the colors from your life. Loneliness can make you think no one loves you. Abandonment can make you doubt your worth. But all of this, all this suffering, all this darkness, is not the end of your story. It was in abandonment, in agony, in silence, and in darkness that Jesus made the most powerful choice in history: to love, even wounded, even rejected, even afraid, even feeling abandoned by God. He chose to continue, chose to resist, chose to persevere, chose to love until the last breath. And because he continued, you can too. Not because you are strong enough, not because you have to get over it soon, not because your pain isn't real, but because you don't walk alone. You don't need to pretend you're okay. You don't need to hide your tears. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to carry this burden alone. Today, Jesus says to you, I know what it's like. I've been there. I understand you, and I am with you. Even in the darkness, even in the silence, even when it seems there is no way out, I am here. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the beginning of your dawn. There are moments in life when faith seems distant. You pray, and heaven remains silent. You cry out, and feel nothing. You seek, and it seems God is too far away to hear. And when this happens, doubt begins to whisper, has God abandoned me? Is my faith not strong enough? Am I the problem? These questions hurt. They wound the soul. Because you believe, you try, you persist, but it feels like you're losing your connection with God. And this is where many give up. Give up on prayer. Give up on trying. Give up on continuing to believe. But what if I told you that even Jesus went through this? Yes, Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, also had a moment where his faith was tested to the extreme. And it wasn't in a desert, nor in a storm. It was while hanging on a cross, with his body bloodied, his face disfigured, and his heart broken. In the most anguishing moment of his life, Jesus didn't shout words of victory. He didn't quote promises aloud. He didn't proclaim triumphant faith. He cried out for help. The Gospel, according to Matthew chapter 27, verse 46, records one of the most human phrases in the entire Bible. My God, why have you forsaken me? Read that again, with an open heart. My God, why have you forsaken me? It's Jesus, the same Jesus who calmed storms, who cast out demons, who raised the dead. Now, he's hanging on a cross, feeling the weight of all humanity's sins, and he doesn't feel the Father's presence. He's there, bloodied, naked, exposed, and alone. Perhaps you're going through something like this right now. Perhaps your pain is so great that even your faith seems to be crumbling. Perhaps you've asked this same question in the silence of your heart. God, why have you abandoned me? And you know what this shows? That your pain isn't a lack of faith. It's exactly the proof that you're still trying, still seeking, still crying out. Jesus didn't doubt God, but he felt the weight of silence, and that is profoundly human. Sometimes we think that faith means feeling God all the time, that faith means praying and receiving an answer right away, that faith means living with a smile, even in the midst of pain. But that's a distorted view. True faith remains, even when there is no answer. True faith continues, even when everything inside you wants to give up. And that's what Jesus did, even without feeling the Father. He didn't curse, didn't murmur, didn't come down from the cross. He remained. That is faith. True faith. Faith that bleeds, but doesn't give up. Faith that suffers, but doesn't become corrupted. Faith that doesn't depend on feelings, but on conviction. In the book of Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 it is written, Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Jesus hoped for the Father, even without seeing him, even without hearing him, even in silence. And he remained, because he knew that God's silence was not absence, it was part of the plan. It's difficult to accept, but sometimes God is silent to shape us. In moments when everything is fine, it's easy to sing, pray, smile. But in dark moments, when there is no light, no direction, that's where faith becomes real. It was in the silence of the cross that Jesus showed the greatest act of faith in history, not with beautiful words, but with endurance. And perhaps your silence now, this phase where it seems God is not hearing you, is exactly the moment when He is shaping you from within, not to punish you, not to abandon you, but to show you that faith is not about quick answers. It's about trusting even without seeing. In Psalm 34, verse 18, it is written, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." You don't need perfect faith. You just need to continue. Jesus shouted. Jesus wept. Jesus felt alone. And even so, He didn't abandon His purpose. Perhaps you're at that point now. Perhaps you've said, "I can't take it anymore. I don't know how to pray anymore. I can't believe anymore." But even with that muffled cry in your heart, you're here. You pressed play on this video. You're seeking, and that is already faith. Faith doesn't need to be great. Jesus Himself said, in the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 17, verse 20, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, nothing will be impossible for you." In other words, faith can be small, it can be fragile, it can be tired, but if it's genuine, it carries power. And today, God isn't asking you to be strong. He's simply calling you to continue, even without understanding, even without feeling, even without strength, because that's how Jesus did it. The beauty of the cross isn't just in salvation, it's in the example. Jesus showed that faith is not the absence of pain. It's the decision to continue even with pain. He taught us that it's possible to feel fear, sadness, abandonment, and still to trust. He showed that it's possible to feel weak and still be obedient. He proved that faith doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to endure. And perhaps today, your greatest proof of faith is not giving up. Not giving up on living. Not giving up on loving. Not giving up on praying. You can cry. You can shout. You can feel that you can't take anymore. But if you continue, you're already winning, because Jesus also felt weak, also felt alone, also felt abandoned, and He endured. That's why, today, He understands you, He embraces you, He sustains you, and He says to you, "I know how you feel, and I am with you until the end. I know what it's like. I've been there. I understand you, and I am with you, even in darkness, even in silence, even when it seems there is no way out. I am here, and perhaps, just perhaps, this is the beginning of your dawn." What many don't realize is that deep sadness is not the enemy of faith. Sometimes it's the path to a more mature faith, because when God seems distant, when heaven seems like bronze, when tears won't stop falling, that's when you discover what your faith is really made of. It's not made of emotions. It's not made of sensations. It's made of decisions. The decision to wake up one more day. The decision to try one more time. The decision to trust, even when everything inside you says it's not worth it. King David, a man after God's own heart, wrote in Psalm 42, "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me?" These are not the words of someone who didn't know God. They are the words of someone who knew Him deeply, and yet felt devastated inside. David didn't pretend to be okay. He didn't hide his pain. He didn't say he was blessed and highly favored, when, in truth, he was broken inside. He was real. He was honest. He was human. And that's exactly what God expects from you. Not perfection, not religiosity, not performance, just honesty. Psalm 34 verse 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Note the words carefully. God isn't close to those with whole hearts, nor to those with elevated spirits. He is close to the broken, to the downcast, to those who feel they no longer have strength to continue. That's the greatest demonstration of God's grace. When you are strong, you think you don't need Him. When you are happy, you barely remember to thank Him. When everything is going well, you go your own way, confident in your own strength. But when depression knocks at the door, when sadness settles in the soul, when darkness seems endless, that's when God reveals Himself like never before. Not as a distant God who demands perfection, but as a close God who understands weakness. Jesus, in His humanity, experienced the deepest of sorrows. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He said to the disciples, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't being dramatic. He was describing exactly what He felt, a sorrow so deep that it threatened His very life. The Gospels tell us that Jesus sweat drops of blood in that garden, a medical phenomenon called hematidrosis, caused by extreme stress. His physical body was responding to the anguish of his soul, exactly as happens with many who suffer from depression today. Body pains that come from the soul, insomnia that comes from a restless heart, loss of appetite that comes from a troubled mind. Jesus went through this. He doesn't just understand theoretically, he lived it in his skin. And even so, in the midst of the deepest anguish, he did something extraordinary. He knelt and prayed, not because he felt good, not because he wanted to, but because he knew that despite the pain, the Father was still there. That's mature faith. Faith that goes beyond feelings. Faith that withstands the storm. You might be thinking, but I can't pray like that. I don't have that strength. I can barely get out of bed. And Jesus says to you today, I know, I understand, and it's okay. Prayer doesn't need to be eloquent, nor long, nor full of beautiful words. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is just a sigh. God, help me. 2 words. That's simple. And you don't even need to say it out loud. God hears even the silent cries of your soul. The psalmist said in Psalm 56, verse 8, You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. God collects your tears. He records each one of them, like a precious treasure, because to him your pain matters, your feelings matter, your suffering matters, and even when it seems he is silent, he is working, he is healing, he is restoring. The process may be slow, it may be painful, it may seem endless, but the promise still stands. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147, verse 3. It's not an empty promise. It's not just a beautiful phrase. It's a divine commitment, and God never breaks his promises. So, if today you feel like you're at the bottom of the pit, if sadness seems endless, if depression has stolen your joy, your peace, your hope, know that Jesus has been there. He knows that place. He experienced that emptiness, and he overcame, not because he was strong, but because he trusted the Father, even when he couldn't feel his presence. And that's what he invites you to do today. Trust, even without feeling, even without seeing, even without understanding. Trust that, just as the sun always rises after the darkest night, joy always returns after the deepest sorrow. Not because you are strong, but because he is faithful. God promises in the book of Isaiah, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This renewal doesn't happen suddenly. It's not magic. It's a process that begins with a simple act of faith, continuing, simply continuing to breathe, continuing to hope, continuing to trust, even when it hurts, even when it's tiring, even when it seems impossible, because that's what Jesus did. And if you're here today, if you're still breathing, if you're still seeking, then you're already winning. You're following in the footsteps of the one who faced the deepest darkness and emerged from it gloriously. Jesus doesn't promise that the pain will end immediately. He doesn't guarantee that tomorrow you'll wake up completely healed, but he promises something much more precious, his presence. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. Every day, in good and bad, in easy and difficult, in joy and in sorrow, he is there, always, without exception. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle of all, knowing that you are never alone. Even when you feel abandoned by everyone, even when the darkness seems impenetrable, even when sadness seems endless, he is with you, walking by your side, carrying you in his arms when necessary. As it is written in Psalm 23, Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The valley of shadow is real, depression is real, pain is real, but God's presence is even more real. And one day, perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but one day, you'll look back and see that, even in the darkest moments, there were footprints beside yours, footprints of a God who never left you, footprints of a Savior who knows your pain, footprints of a friend who never gave up on you. And on that day, you'll understand that the valley wasn't the end of the journey. It was just a chapter, a painful chapter, yes, but not the end of the story, because your story doesn't end at the cross, just as Jesus didn't end there. After the Friday of agony came the Sunday of resurrection. After death came life. After darkness came light. And after your dark night, your dawn will come. It's a promise. It's a certainty. It's a hope that doesn't disappoint, because it's established not on what you feel, not on what you see, but on the unchangeable character of the one who promised, "Behold, I am making all things new." Revelation chapter 21, verse 5. Including you, including your mind, including your broken heart. So today, allow yourself to be weak. Allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to feel the pain. But don't give up, because Jesus didn't give up on you. He went all the way for you. And now he extends his hand and says, "Come, let's walk this path together. I know the way out. Trust him, one step at a time, one day at a time. And soon you'll discover that even in the densest darkness, the light of Christ continues to shine in you, for you, through you, and that light no one can extinguish." And perhaps you're wondering now, how do I find light in the midst of darkness? How do I connect with God when I feel so distant? How do I pray when the words won't come? When everything is going well, praying is simple. You thank, you ask, you feel the presence, you repeat beautiful words. But when everything falls apart, when the ground disappears, when the soul goes silent, when the heart bleeds, prayer becomes a challenge. It's difficult to talk to a God who seems distant. Difficult to find words when pain occupies all the space. Difficult to kneel when everything in you wants to give up. And it's exactly there, in the midst of suffering, in the midst of silence, in the midst of chaos, that prayer reveals itself as a cry of the soul. Perhaps today you haven't prayed like you used to. Perhaps you don't even know what to say anymore. Or perhaps you've started prayers that ended in tears. But all of this is still prayer. The most powerful prayer isn't the most beautiful. It's the most sincere. And no one taught us this better than Jesus. On the darkest night of his life, Jesus didn't recite psalms with eloquence. He didn't speak calmly, nor with theologically structured phrases. He prayed in agony. In the Gospel according to Luke chapter 22, verse 44, it is written, "And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground." Jesus prayed like someone who is struggling inside, like someone who is being crushed by pain, but still finds strength to turn to God. This is prayer in suffering. It's praying even without understanding. It's talking to God even when everything seems lost. It's pouring out your soul, even when words fail. And do you know what's most beautiful about this moment? God heard, even though heaven seemed silent, even though the angels didn't respond, even though relief didn't come immediately. The Father heard every word, every tear, every sigh. And this is what you need to remember today. Your pain doesn't silence heaven. Many people think that praying is like pushing a button. You speak, God responds. You ask, he delivers. You cry out, he acts. But it's not like that. Prayer isn't an automatic reward system. It's a connection channel between a limited human soul and an infinite God. It's through prayer that you pour yourself out before God, that you empty yourself, that you allow yourself to be seen as you really are. And Jesus showed us this intensely in Gethsemane. In the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 26, verse 39, he prays saying, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." This is the most honest prayer in history. Jesus asks not to suffer. He says, "Father, if there's another way, please, deliver me from this." But at the same time, he surrenders, "Not as I will, but as you will." He places himself in the position of son, of servant, of one who trusts. Even in the dark, many people pray expecting God to change their circumstances. But sometimes God's greatest answer isn't outside, it's inside. Jesus prayed, and the suffering didn't disappear. The cup wasn't taken away. The cross was still before him. But after praying, something had changed. Jesus rose differently, strengthened, prepared, convinced. Prayer didn't change the scenario, but it changed Jesus from within. And that's what God wants to do with you. Perhaps your problem won't disappear right now. Perhaps the pain will still continue for some time. Perhaps depression will still visit you for some days, weeks, or months. But if you pray with sincerity, with an open heart, God will transform you from within. He will give you peace in the midst of the storm. He will give you strength in the midst of weakness. He will give you hope where there was only darkness. Prayer is like a small flame that you light in the middle of the darkest night. At first it seems fragile, trembling, almost invisible. But the more you pray, the more this flame grows, and soon it begins to illuminate not only your path, but also the path of others who, like you, are lost in darkness. Yes, there are days when praying seems impossible. The mouth falls silent, the heart closes, the mind gets lost. But even on those days, you can pray, not with words, but with presence. Sitting in silence before God is also prayer. Shedding tears on your pillow, thinking of Him, is also prayer. Whispering a "help me" in the middle of the night is also prayer. In Romans chapter 8, verse 26, it is written, "In the same way the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans." In other words, when you can't pray, the Holy Spirit prays for you. He understands what you feel. He interprets what you can't say. He brings to the Father the prayer that is hidden in your chest. You are not alone, not even in silence. When sadness is too deep for words, when exhaustion is too great to formulate sentences, when all you can do is breathe, the Holy Spirit takes that sigh and transforms it into a perfect prayer. You don't need to be eloquent to be heard. You don't need to know verses by heart to touch God's heart. You don't need to appear spiritual for your prayer to have value. God is not impressed by appearances. He sees the heart, and a broken heart, a sincere heart, a heart that, even amid depression, still turns to Him. That heart, God does not despise. Jesus learned obedience through suffering. In the book of Hebrews chapter 5 verse 8, it is written, "Son though He was, He learned obedience from what He suffered." Suffering didn't destroy Jesus. It formed Jesus. And prayer was the tool that kept His faith alive in the midst of pain. That's why today He invites you. Talk to me, just as you are, with whatever words you have, or without words, if that's the case. But speak, pray, connect. It doesn't matter if you feel like you've lost the way. It doesn't matter if you think God won't listen. It doesn't matter if your prayer seems messy, tearful, repetitive, silent. God hears what comes from the heart. And the heart that suffers when it turns to God is capable of experiencing miracles, even if invisible. Perhaps you've already tried to pray during your depression and felt as if your words hit the ceiling and came back, as if God were too busy to hear you, as if your prayers were too small to make a difference. But the truth is that no prayer is too small for God. No request is too insignificant. No cry goes unnoticed. God doesn't just hear beautiful prayers, He hears real prayers. And sometimes the most real prayer is the one that says, "God, I can't take it anymore. Help me." Jesus prayed like this in Gethsemane. He didn't try to appear strong. He didn't try to hide what he felt. He didn't pretend everything was fine. He was real. He was transparent. He was human. And that's the beauty of prayer and suffering. It reminds us that we don't need to pretend before God. We can cry. We can question. We can even say, "Why, God? Why is this happening to me?" Because in the end, prayer isn't about changing God. It's about letting God change you. It's opening space in the midst of pain, for comfort to enter, for light to shine, for hope to be reborn. Jesus, facing the deepest pain, prayed. And if He, being God, did this, who are we not to do it? Even with fear, even with doubts, even crying, Jesus prayed, and He overcame. You can overcome too, not because you are strong, not because you have all the answers, not because you never fail, but because you have a God who understands your pain, a God who has already been in your place, a God who has also felt the weight of sadness, loneliness, anguish, and that same God is with you now, waiting for you to speak to Him, waiting for you to open your heart, waiting to show you that, even in the darkest night, there is a light that never goes out, the light of His presence. Prayer is the path to that light. It's not an easy path, it's not a quick path, but it's a sure path. A path that Jesus walked before you, a path that He now invites you to walk as well, not alone, but with Him, step by step, day by day, until the darkness begins to recede, until the weight begins to diminish, until the clouds begin to disperse, and one day, perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but one day, you'll look back and realize that that small prayer, that "God help me," whispered in the midst of pain, was the beginning of your journey back to the light. Because when we pray, even amid suffering, we are telling God, "I still trust, I still hope, I still believe." And that, in itself, is already a miracle that Jesus lived, a miracle that you can also live. Just begin, with a word, with a sigh, with a tear. God will hear, and He will answer, in His way, in His time. but he will answer, because he is faithful, even when everything seems lost, even when pain seems endless, even when depression tries to convince you there is no way out. He is there. He hears. He answers. And his answer, even if it takes time, is worth the wait, because those who wait on the Lord renew their strength, receive new courage, find new hope, and finally begin to see the dawn after the darkest night, the dawn of healing, the dawn of restoration, the dawn of a new life, a life where scars remain, but no longer as open wounds, but as reminders of what you overcame, of what you conquered, of what God did in you and for you, through prayer, through faith, through perseverance, as Jesus did, as you can also do, today, now, with an open heart and an exposed soul, before the one who knows exactly how you feel and who never, ever will abandon you. Because some wounds don't bleed on the outside, but tear us apart from within, silent, deep, invisible to others' eyes, being betrayed by someone you love, being wronged by those who should protect you, being accused without a chance to defend yourself, being judged in silence. These are the pains that leave invisible marks, scars that no one sees, but that you feel every morning, wounds that transform everything. Your gaze changes, becomes more cautious, more distant. Your trust breaks, like a vase that even when glued back together will never be the same. Your soul closes, like someone locking a door after an invasion, and perhaps you've come this far carrying these marks. Too heavy, too painful, too old. You trusted completely. You believed without reservations. You gave your best, holding nothing back. But from where you least expected came the wound, like lightning in clear skies, like a knife in your back, like a kiss that betrays, perhaps from a friend who knew your secrets, perhaps from someone in your own home who ate your bread, perhaps from someone who looked into your eyes and promised never to abandon you. Whoever it was, you feel as if something has been torn from inside you, a piece of your heart, a fragment of your identity, a part of your ability to trust. And Jesus knows exactly what that's like. Not theoretically, not like someone who read about it, but as someone who experienced it firsthand, because he too was betrayed, deeply betrayed. And not just betrayed, he was unjustly judged, condemned, and humiliated by people who used God's name, by those who should have recognized him first. Think for a moment about the depth of that pain. You choose 12 people to walk with you. You share meals. You travel the roads together. You reveal your plans. You teach them, care for them, love them, trust them, for 3 years, 1,000 days and nights, walking together, facing challenges together, dreaming together, and one of them, for 30 pieces of silver, out of greed or fear, out of disappointment or pressure, decides to sell you out, not with a cry of hatred, not with a violent push, but with a kiss, a gesture of intimacy transformed into a weapon. The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 26 verses 48 and 49 reveals this moment. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. It wasn't a slap. It was a kiss. It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper. It wasn't a stranger. It was a friend. A false demonstration of affection. A gesture that should have represented love and loyalty, but that in that moment sealed Jesus' delivery to death. You know this pain, don't you? The pain of being wounded not by a declared enemy, that would be easier, but by someone you trusted, someone who had access to your heart. How many times have you been hurt by words that were too sweet, by promises that seemed sincere but were empty, by smiles that hid dark intentions, by messages that seemed like love but were manipulation? Betrayal wounds the soul because it breaks trust. It breaks something that seemed unshakable. It destroys not just the present but stains the past, and the pain that comes from it is silent but cruel, persistent, deep. And what's most impressive in this moment, Jesus looked into Judas's eyes, saw the betrayal displayed in them, and still called him friend. In verse 50, Jesus responds with a question loaded with compassion. "Friend, why have you come?" Jesus knew what he was doing, knew he was being handed over, knew every detail of the plan, knew the end of the story, but he didn't shout, didn't react with anger, didn't curse, didn't expose Judas before the others. He called him friend until the last moment. And this teaches us something profoundly transformative. Not all suffering needs to generate bitterness. Not every betrayal needs to transform us into cold people. Not every pain needs to become poison in our hearts. Jesus chose to forgive, even while still bleeding, even when the wound was open, even when everything hurt. And perhaps that's what you need to do today. Not because the betrayal wasn't serious, not because the pain isn't real, but because forgiveness liberates first the one who forgives. After the betrayal, Jesus is taken away, dragged like an animal, with hands tied, pushed, humiliated, as if he were a dangerous criminal. But Jesus never committed sin, never deceived anyone, never hurt, never lied, never committed injustice, never manipulated, never abused, never betrayed. Even so, he was brought before religious judges, priests, elders, teachers of the law, men who claimed to represent God, who quoted scripture by heart, who wore holy garments. And there, in that dark room, begins one of the most shameful trials in history, a theater of justice that was, in reality, pure injustice. The Gospel according to Mark chapter 14 verse 55 exposes the farce. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. Do you see what's happening? They weren't seeking justice, they weren't investigating a crime, they weren't searching for truth. They were looking for a reason, any reason, to kill him. The sentence was already decided. They just needed a justification. Jesus was innocent, and they knew it. But that didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. They wanted to silence the one who disturbed them, the one who spoke of forgiveness, while they spoke of law, the one who healed on the Sabbath, while they discussed rules, the one who ate with sinners while they isolated themselves in supposed holiness, the one who brought life while they carried burdens. And the worst part? False witnesses were called, fabricated testimonies, planned lies. In verse 56, for many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. Lies, fabricated accusations, testimonies that contradicted each other, but were accepted anyway. Because when the intention is to condemn, any excuse will do. How many times have you experienced something similar? How many times have you tasted this bitter flavor? Accused of what you didn't do, judged by appearances, condemned by people who didn't even hear your side, labeled by those who don't know your story. Injustice hurts. It hurts because it suffocates us, takes away our voice, makes us feel powerless, makes us question if it's worth fighting. And that's what Jesus felt there, the pain of being unjustly judged, of having his reputation destroyed, of seeing lies being told about him, and not being able to do anything, or rather, being able to, but choosing not to. Because Jesus could defend himself, he could unmask each lie, counter each accusation, quote passages that proved who he was, perform a miracle right there to silence everyone. But he remained silent, a silence that shouted louder than any defense. The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 27 verses 12 through 14 records this moment. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Jesus did not speak, not because he was weak, not because he had no arguments, not because he was afraid, but because he knew no lie can withstand eternal truth, no injustice can prevail forever, no night is without end. Sometimes the best we can do in the face of injustice is what Jesus did. Remain firm, remain integral, remain confident. Let God be our defense. Let time reveal what is hidden. Let truth, always, come to light, because it always does, even if it takes time, even if it costs, even if it hurts. But the injustice didn't stop there. Jesus was ridiculed, stripped naked in front of everyone, mocked as entertainment. Roman soldiers dressed him as a pretend king. They put on a red cape, imitating royal mantles. They bent branches with sharp thorns and pressed them into his head. They beat him with rods, hurting him even more. They spat in his face, and the worst humiliation in that culture. In the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 27, verses 28 to 30, it is written, "And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. They were laughing at him, mocking, making jokes about his pain, turning his suffering into entertainment. Think about this. The King of the universe, the one who created heaven and earth, the one who shaped every mountain and designed every star, the one who breathed life into every human being. Now he's there, beaten, humiliated, silent, treated like nothing, like a criminal, like a madman. Why? Why did he allow this? Why didn't he respond in kind? Why didn't he show his power? Out of love. That's simple. And at the same time, so profound. For you, for me, for all of us. Because he knew that pain would pass, that humiliation would end, that death would transform into life. And today, 2,000 years later, who remembers the names of those soldiers? Who remembers the names of the false accusers? Who bows before Pilate or Caiaphas? But the name of Jesus? It echoes on every continent. It transforms lives. It continues to free people from the weight of guilt. If today you feel betrayed, if you were hurt by someone you loved with all your soul, if you are being unjustly judged, if you are tired of shouting and no one hearing, if you feel your reputation is being destroyed, if false accusations weigh on your shoulders, know this: Jesus has already been through it. Every detail of that pain, he knows. Every tear you shed, he understands. And more, he overcame. He endured the betrayal, the judgment, the humiliation, and did not allow it to destroy his essence, did not let their hatred become his hatred, did not allow their injustice to stain his justice. You can too. You can overcome this pain. You can move past this betrayal. You can rise above this injustice, not with your own strength, not with your own hands, not with your limited human capacity, but with the strength of the one who has already won for you, who already carried this cross, who already felt this pain. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verse 7, it is written, 700 years before it happened, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Jesus did not lose his dignity. He did not lose control. He did not become what was hurting him. He chose silence when he could have shouted, chose love when he could have hated, chose forgiveness when he could have cursed. And that's what he offers today, to you. The ability to forgive what seems unforgivable, the ability to love those who hurt you, the ability to maintain your peace, even when everything around you falls apart. Not because the betrayal wasn't serious, it was. Not because injustice doesn't hurt, it does. Not because false accusations don't wound, they do. But because there is something greater than all of this. There is a purpose that transcends pain. There is a healing that goes beyond the wound. And this purpose has a name, Jesus. This path has a direction, forward. This healing has a price, already paid. When you surrender your pain to him, when you allow him to heal your wounds, when you let forgiveness take the place of resentment, you discover that no betrayal defines who you are. No unjust judgment determines your worth. No false accusation seals your destiny. Because you belong to someone greater. You are loved by someone who doesn't fail. You are defended by someone who sees everything. And in the end, truth always prevails. Love always wins. Light always dispels darkness. As it happened with Jesus. As it will happen with you. If you only trust. If you only surrender. If you only forgive. As he did for you. But even when we learn to forgive like Jesus, even when we endure injustice with dignity, there is a type of pain that still seems insurmountable. A pain that cannot be explained. A pain that doesn't scream, that doesn't bleed, that can't be seen. It's the pain of looking up to heaven and seeing no response, of praying with your heart in pieces and feeling that God is silent, of crying out until your voice fails and receiving only the echo of your own cry. It's the type of pain that seems to say, you are alone. No one is listening. Perhaps there is no way out. Perhaps you have felt this. Perhaps you are feeling it now. Perhaps you are in the abyss of this silence at this very moment. You pray, on your knees, with tears. You cry out, with hands raised, with a hoarse voice. You plead, with sincerity, with desperation. But what comes back to you is just silence, a deafening silence, a silence that weighs like lead, a silence that seems to confirm your deepest fears. And then doubt sets in. Has God forgotten me? Is my faith not enough? Am I being punished? Have I gone too far, and now he has gone silent? Have I lost my chance? Doubt transforms into fear. Fear transforms into anguish. Anguish transforms into despair, and you feel increasingly alone. If this is your feeling, take a deep breath, stop for a moment, look up, because there is a truth that can set you free. Even Jesus felt this way. The very Son of God, the one who never sinned, the one who had perfect communion with the Father, even he knew this pain. Have you ever stopped to think about what was most painful for Jesus? In the sequence of tortures he suffered, was it the weight of the cross crushing his shoulders already torn by whips? The nails piercing his hands and feet, going through nerves, tendons, and bones? The lashes that tore pieces of his flesh? The crown of thorns that penetrated his skull? The unbearable thirst? The lack of air? All of this was terrible, inhuman, cruel beyond imagination. But the greatest pain wasn't physical, it was spiritual. It was the feeling of abandonment. It was the silence of the Father. It was feeling that the one who had always been there seemed to have gone away. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he had a perfect connection with God. He said phrases like, "I and the Father are one." Gospel according to John chapter 10 verse 30. "The Father has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him." John chapter 8 verse 29. Jesus consulted the Father before each decision. He spent entire nights in prayer. He heard God's voice clearly. He felt his presence with each step. But suddenly, on the cross, everything seems to change. The hours pass, the pain increases, the sky darkens, and God seems absent. In the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 27 verse 46, it is written, "About the 9th hour Jesus cried out in a loud voice saying, 'Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?' That is, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a philosophical question. It was a scream, a deep cry that tore through the sky, a desperate lament that echoed through Golgotha. Jesus, the beloved Son, is now crying out like someone who has been forgotten, like someone who has been abandoned, like someone who feels alone. He isn't doubting God's existence. He isn't blaspheming. He isn't giving up on faith. He is feeling at a level we could never comprehend, feeling what every human feels when it seems God isn't listening, when the pain is so great you don't know if you can take anymore, when the sky seems like bronze, and prayers return as an empty echo, when each minute seems like eternity, when each breath hurts. Jesus lived this. Jesus felt this. God himself experienced the silence of God, and he screamed. Yes, he screamed. He didn't contain the pain in a polite sigh. He didn't disguise the suffering in a methodical prayer. He screamed for the entire universe to hear. Screamed so you would know you're not alone. Screamed to break the silence that you also face. Because there are pains that don't fit into gentle words. There are sufferings that need to be screamed out. There are moments when a whisper is not enough. And God is not scandalized by your scream. He is not offended by your anguish. He doesn't demand that you smile when you're shattered inside. Jesus' cry on the cross shows us something powerful. Even God's silence has a purpose. Even his apparent absence has a reason. Even temporary distance is part of the plan. It may seem contradictory, but it's true. God was there, even when Jesus felt forsaken, even when he couldn't hear the Father's voice, even when darkness covered everything, even when the weight of the entire world crushed his body. God was present, but he didn't act as we expected, not as we wanted, not in the time we imagined. And perhaps this is the point that most confuses our hearts. We think that if God is present, he will do something immediate. He will prevent pain before it arrives. He will remove the problem like someone putting out a fire. He will embrace us with instant relief. But sometimes God doesn't take away the pain. He passes through it with you, doesn't remove the fire, but accompanies you within it, doesn't silence the storm, but holds you in the midst of it. That's how it was with Jesus, and that's how it is with you, because the absence of answers is not the absence of love. God's silence is not rejection. Waiting is not abandonment. It's a mysterious part of the plan. It's a purpose we still can't see. It's a story that's still being written. On the cross, Jesus carried the sin of the entire world. All evil, all violence, all lies, all injustice ever committed, and that would still be committed. And in that moment, the righteous one became a curse. The light of the world was covered in darkness. The innocent took the place of the guilty. The perfect Son took on the guilt of the imperfect. And for an instant, the Father was silent. Not because he stopped loving, not because he abandoned the plan, not because he gave up on Jesus, but because something greater was happening, something that transcended that terrible moment, something that would change history forever. Jesus was saving you. He was paying a price you could never pay. He was opening a way you could never open. He was becoming the way, the bridge, the mediator, between a holy God and a broken humanity, between a perfect heaven and an earth in ruins. And for this to happen, he had to face the silence. He had to feel abandoned. He had to know the abyss of separation. Perhaps you are experiencing exactly this. You pray and nothing happens. You cry out, and everything remains the same. You seek, and your heart continues in ruins. You worship, and the tears don't stop falling. You try again, and again, and again, but it seems God doesn't respond. It seems there's no one on the other side. It seems your words are lost in emptiness, and what hurts more isn't even the problem. It's feeling that you're fighting alone. It's the sensation of abandonment. It's the fear that God has forgotten you. But today, Jesus wants to remind you, you are not alone. You never were. You never will be. And this silence has a purpose, has a meaning, has an end. It could be that God is teaching you to trust, not by what you feel, but by who He is, not by circumstances, but by promise, not by the visible, but by the invisible. It could be that He is strengthening you, maturing you, preparing you for something greater, bringing you even closer to who He is. Or it could be that He is acting in the invisible, behind the scenes, moving mountains you don't even know exist, closing doors that would destroy you, opening paths you still can't see, doing something you will only understand later, much later. The book of Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 8 and 9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." God's silence is not neglect. It's wisdom. It's divine strategy. It's love that sees beyond. It's love that knows the right moment. It's care that goes beyond our understanding. It's protection we cannot measure. God knows when to speak, knows when to act, and, the most difficult for us, knows when to wait. Sometimes silence is the answer, not the final one, but the necessary one for this moment. You won't always be able to make long and elaborate prayers. You won't always have the strength to speak calmly and clearly. You won't always know what to say or how to express it. You won't always have the right words. But sometimes, a scream is all you can give. A sigh, a groan, a tear, and that's okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel this pain. It's okay not to understand, because God hears even the groans. He understands the crying. He translates the silence. He interprets what you don't even know how to express. In the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 26, it is written, "Likewise the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words." While you suffer in silence, the Spirit prays for you. While you cry quietly, God is working. While you feel alone, there is an invisible army around you. Your cry is not ignored. Your suffering is not in vain. Your pain is not wasted. Your wait has purpose. And even if it seems God is not speaking, He is still present. Even if it seems He is not listening, He is closer than you imagine. Because the story doesn't end in silence. It never did. It never will. The cross was not the end. Silence was not the last word. Pain was not the final scene. Abandonment was not the period at the end of the sentence. After the cry came resurrection. After the Friday of agony came the Sunday of glory. After the darkest night came the brightest morning. The same Jesus who cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" 3 days later rose from the tomb, victorious, restored, glorified. He conquered death, conquered silence, conquered hell, conquered separation, and proved that even in silence, God was acting. Even in apparent absence, there was a perfect plan. Even in abandonment, there was redemption. Today, the cross reminds us that suffering is real, but hope is greater. Pain is deep, but love is deeper. Silence is agonizing, but the promise is unshakable. The cry is not a sign of weakness. It's the bridge between pain and miracle. It's the scream that precedes victory. It's the night that precedes dawn. If you are in your moment of the cross, in your darkest valley, in your most painful silence, in your driest desert, continue. Just continue. Scream if you need to. Cry if that's all you can do. Wait, even if it hurts. Trust even without seeing, but continue. One step after another, one day after another, one prayer after another, because the God who seems silent is the same one who has already prepared the third day, is the same one who transforms tombs into cradles of resurrection, is the same one who makes the darkest night the setting for the brightest miracle. His silence is not absence, it's presence working behind the scenes. It's love preparing something your eyes still cannot see. It's grace that soon you will not only hear but touch with your own hands. There is a moment in every journey of pain when you need to make a choice. The third day we talked about is coming, but between the promise and its fulfillment, there exists a space called choice. You have already prayed. You have already cried. You have already screamed. You have already waited. And yet the pain continues. It's at this point, when everything seems unbearable, when God's silence still echoes in your ears, that the soul cries out for a decision. Do I continue, or do I give up? This is where many fall, not from weakness but from exhaustion. Depression whispers, stop. Fear insists, run away. Pain begs, give up. And if this is your state today, know this. You are in the place where Jesus also was. And it was exactly at this hour that he did something that changed the history of humanity. Jesus chose to continue, not because he was feeling well, not because the suffering had ceased, not because he felt the Father's presence again, but because he knew the purpose was greater than the pain. He could have escaped. In Gethsemane, before being arrested, he had a real opportunity to flee. The disciples were sleeping. The soldiers had not yet arrived. It was night, silence. The darkness offered perfect cover. If he had wanted to, he could have taken a few steps away, and everything would have been avoided. But he stayed. He didn't run from the pain. He didn't avoid the suffering. He didn't choose the easiest path. He remained. And this is the crucial point about depression. To remain when everything inside you wants to flee. Because Jesus knew that what was coming, despite being painful, would save lives. And perhaps without realizing it, you are at this same crossroads. You too can flee. You can abandon everything. You can silence your faith. You can stop fighting. You can surrender to the abyss that calls you. But what if continuing is what will transform your story? What if your act of resistance today becomes someone else's miracle tomorrow? Jesus was betrayed, humiliated, wronged, beaten. His friends ran away. His body was wounded, his soul in distress. His spirit called out to a Father who seemed silent, but he continued, even with his body crushed, even bleeding, even with trembling legs, even under mockery, even feeling abandoned. He carried the cross. The Gospel according to John chapter 19 verse 17 says, "And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called Calvary." Can you imagine this? A wounded man, almost without strength, still, with a wooden beam on his back, climbing a hill, one step after another, even when every muscle begged to stop. Each step was pain. Each heartbeat was suffering. Each inch forward, an act of resistance. Each movement, a declaration, I choose to continue. Jesus could have stopped. He could have said, I've done enough. But he carried on, because he knew that someone, someday, would be inspired by this moment to not give up. Perhaps that someone is you. Jesus didn't continue because he had more strength than we do. On the contrary, he was exhausted, physically destroyed, emotionally drained, spiritually pressed. The depression of the soul had reached its limit, but what made him continue wasn't strength, it was purpose. He knew there was something beyond that pain, that there was meaning even if the path was cruel, that the Father's silence wasn't the end of the story. You need to remember this too. Your pain is not the end, it's the crossing. You are on your way to something, and continuing is what gets you there. It's not about being strong all the time. It's not about not feeling the weight of darkness. It's about choosing to rise, even when everything inside you wants to stop. It's about taking one more step, even when your legs can no longer bear it. Jesus taught us this with his life, and with the cross. Even hanging on the cross, Jesus continued to make choices. He could have cursed. He could have gone silent. He could have closed himself in pain. He could have surrendered to despair, but he continued loving. In the Gospel according to Luke chapter 23 verse 34, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." He prays for those who hurt him. Can you comprehend this? At the height of pain, when depression could have consumed him, he was concerned about others. He didn't allow pain to make him bitter. He didn't let suffering transform him into someone cruel. Later, in verse 43, he looks at a thief beside him and says, "Assuredly I say to you, Today you will be with me in paradise. He comforts one who deserved condemnation. He offers hope when hope itself seemed dead. He promises a tomorrow when his today was ending. And finally, in the Gospel according to John chapter 19 verse 30, he declares, "It is finished." In other words, I went all the way. I completed the mission. I chose to continue. Even when heaven was silent, I didn't give up. Even when the pain was unbearable, I persisted. Even when everything seemed lost, I concluded. And then, he surrenders his spirit. Until the last breath, it was obedience. Until the last look, it was love. Until the last exhalation, it was choice. Until the last moment, it was purpose. Perhaps you are bleeding inside. Perhaps you can no longer hide the pain. Perhaps you're thinking of giving up. Perhaps depression has clouded your vision to the point where you can't see a way out. But today you heard about a man who chose to continue, even wounded, even in the dark, even abandoned, even without feeling the Father's presence. And what he did on that cross was to give you the chance to choose too. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be strong. You don't need to pretend you're okay. You just need to continue. And continuing can be taking a deep breath, even without wanting to, praying with tears, even without words, opening your eyes tomorrow, even wanting to sleep forever, loving, even after being betrayed, forgiving, even without receiving an apology, getting out of bed, even when your body feels made of lead, smiling, even when inside you are screaming, believing, even when faith is just the size of a mustard seed. Continuing is an act of faith, and Jesus invites you to take this step. He knows the weight you carry. He knows the pains that no one sees. He understands the wounds that haven't yet healed. He comprehends the abyss of depression that sometimes seems to swallow you. But he also knows what comes after the pain, because he lived through all of this. And after the cross came the resurrection. The enemy wants you to think it's over, that you won't make it, that this pain will consume you, that this depression is your final destination, that this emptiness will never be filled. But Jesus looks at you today and says, "It's not finished. There is still a way forward. There are still promises. There is still life. There is still purpose. There is still dawn after this night. Yes, you may be wounded, hurt, exhausted, empty, with your soul in pieces. But that doesn't mean it's over." Jesus' story seemed to have ended on the cross. His body was motionless. His blood had dried. His breathing had ceased. But the third day was coming. Yours is too. That silence from God we mentioned, it was just the interval between Good Friday's crucifixion and Resurrection Sunday. And if you continue, even dragging your feet, you'll see that the pain that wounded you can transform into the strength that raises you up. The depression that almost destroyed you, can become the testimony that will save others. The emptiness that consumed you can be the space where God will pour abundance. Because when you choose to continue, even wounded, even in the dark, even without understanding you are doing exactly what Jesus did. And that choice, that simple, painful, and powerful choice, is what transforms crosses into resurrections. So, today, in the midst of your pain, continue. Not because it's easy, not because the pain has passed, not because you feel strong, but because there is a God who continued for you, and now walks by your side. Even when you don't feel him, even when he seems silent, he is there, sustaining your every step. Continue. Your third day is coming. The choice to continue even when wounded is just the beginning, because after that moment of decision comes the journey. There's a detail in Jesus' story that many forget. He didn't just overcome pain, he left traces along the way. That third day we talked about didn't come by chance. It came because each step Jesus took prepared the way for victory. Footprints marked by blood, yes, but also by purpose, by faith, by hope, by a determination that depression couldn't overcome. Each step Jesus took from Gethsemane to the empty tomb wasn't taken by chance. It was taken out of love, for me, for you, for all of us, for every soul that would one day find itself at rock bottom. And more than that, each step was a map for those suffering today. If you're feeling lost, confused, wounded, if you feel you don't know where to go anymore, if depression has darkened all your paths, Jesus doesn't just understand. He has already walked this path and overcome. And now, he shows you how to continue. For many, the cross is the symbol of death, of defeat, of the end, of absolute failure, of darkness with no return. But for Jesus, the cross was the bridge. It was through it that he destroyed the power of guilt, of fear, of death, of depression, of hopelessness. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 2, verse 14, it is written that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil. Jesus surrendered himself to death so you could have life. He plunged into darkness so you could find light. He experienced abandonment so you would never feel alone again. And he didn't just die, he overcame. He overcame betrayal, he overcame humiliation, he overcame silence, he overcame the cross, he overcame hell, he overcame the tomb, he overcame the deepest depression any human has ever felt. And his victory wasn't selfish, it was a victory with a shared destination. He overcame to open the way for you to overcome too. That choice to continue that you made yesterday, that decision to rise once more, each small step you take in the darkness, it's because he has already opened the way. Jesus didn't stay on a distant throne shouting orders. He came down. He didn't say overcome depression from afar. He entered into it. He entered our story. He wore our pain. He cried our tears. He felt our flesh. He sweated our sweat. He bled through our wounds. He experienced our emptiness. He knew our despair. And in doing so, he didn't just sympathize when he created a path, a real path, that begins in pain, passes through surrender, and ends in resurrection. He doesn't say, go there. He says, come with me. In the Gospel according to John chapter 14 verse 6, he declares, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Notice, he doesn't say he shows the way. He says he is the way, Jesus himself, the one who went through pain and came out the other side, the one who experienced darkness and emerged into light, the one who felt the weight of the world and still rose up. If you are in the midst of the valley, look to him, follow his steps, because he has already walked this path before, and each step you take, following him, is a step out of the abyss. After he rose again, Jesus could have appeared with a perfect body, without marks, without memories of pain, completely new. But he kept the marks. His hands still had the holes from the nails. His side was still wounded. His feet still bore the scars. His glorified body still carried memories of suffering. In the Gospel according to John chapter 20 verse 27, Jesus looks at Thomas and says, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Why did Jesus keep the marks? Why didn't he erase every trace of pain? Because scars tell a story, and more than that, they serve as a compass. Each of his scars cries out to the world. Yes, pain exists, but it's not the end. Yes, the wound was deep, but it healed. Yes, I bled, but I rose. Yes, I suffered depression, but I overcame it. Jesus overcame, but he didn't hide the process. He shows us it's possible to suffer and still rise. It's possible to cry and still walk. It's possible to be wounded and still heal others. It's possible to feel the weight of darkness and still find light. Your wounds don't need to be shameful. They can be a testimony. Your struggles with depression don't need to be secret. They can be the means by which others will find hope. Your scars aren't signs of failure. They are maps to show others how to escape the abyss. Perhaps you're expecting that by following Jesus, everything will instantly improve. That pain will disappear with a snap of the fingers. That problems will cease as if by magic. That depression will vanish like fog in the sun. But the truth is that following Jesus doesn't mean absence of pain. It means his presence in pain. The path of resurrection doesn't ignore the cross. It passes through it. The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 28 verse 20 ends with this promise. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Jesus doesn't abandon you. He doesn't hand you a map and walk away. He doesn't point out the way and disappear. He walks with you. He stays by your side. He moves at your pace. He holds you when your legs fail. He carries you when you can no longer take another step. He breathes with you when air seems to be lacking. And if you fall, he lifts you up. And if you get lost in the darkness, he is the light that never goes out. The cross was real. The suffering was real. The death was real. The abandonment was real. The darkness was real. But life was too. Jesus' resurrection is the greatest proof that pain doesn't have the last word, that depression isn't the final chapter, that the night, no matter how long, always yields to dawn. Yes, you may be in the middle of the valley. Yes, you may be going through a dark night. Yes, you may feel there is no way out. But morning comes. The tomb wasn't able to hold him, and it won't hold you either. In the book of Revelation chapter 1 verse 18, Jesus says, I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. He has the keys. He has overcome everything that could imprison you. He has defeated every chain that could bind you. He is greater than every abyss that tries to swallow you. He is alive, and he calls you to live too, just as you chose to continue, even wounded. Now is the time to choose to follow, even with scars. In overcoming pain, Jesus didn't just secure eternal life. He taught us how to live the present life, with forgiveness, with compassion, with faith, with purpose, with hope renewed every morning. He showed that even in the midst of pain, it's possible to love. Even in suffering, it's possible to serve. Even under pressure, it's possible to remain faithful. Even in the deepest darkness, it's possible to be light. And now he asks you, will you come with me? It's not an invitation to an easy path. It's an invitation to a true path, the only one that takes you from pain to resurrection, from depression to hope, from emptiness to fullness, from death to life. That choice you made to continue, it was just the first step. Now Jesus invites you to follow his footsteps, not because the path will be without pain, not because the journey will be without tears, but because each step beside him brings you a little closer to your resurrection. This is the invitation. This is the promise. This is the way. A path marked by the blood of the one who understands your pain and who promised not only to be with you in it, but to lead you through it, to the light of the third day that is coming. You've made it this far. You've heard every word. You've felt the weight of pain and the power of love. You've seen Jesus being rejected, beaten, crucified, and still choosing to love until the last second. Now the story is no longer before your eyes. It's before your heart. The question that echoes from Golgotha remains alive. And now, what will you do with this truth? Because the cross was more than a sacrifice. It was a call to a new life, to a new way of facing the world, to live differently, with purpose, faith, and direction, even when everything seems to fall apart. But let's be honest, real life isn't always easy. Dark days come, anxiety hits, doubts grow, internal struggles seem greater than our strength. It's exactly in these moments that Jesus' teachings become more than beautiful words. They become tools for life. Jesus didn't just overcome pain, he showed how to overcome it. And perhaps you need that now. Direction, a step-by-step guide, practical help to get through the daily battles with more faith, courage, and balance. If that's your case, if you felt that this video touched you in a genuine way, then know that the next step may be very important. In recent times, we've prepared something special, not something miraculous, not an empty promise, but a simple and practical guide based on Jesus' teachings that can help you face daily challenges with more clarity and purpose. We're not talking about magic formulas. What you'll find in this material isn't a shiny covered miracle, but a concrete way to walk with Jesus even when everything seems to go wrong. A guide born from pain, faith, and the desire to continue. Just like you, if throughout this video you saw yourself in Jesus' tears, in his loneliness, in his anguish, in his choice to continue, then this guide was made for you. Not because you are weak, but because even being strong, you don't need to fight alone. Jesus left a path, and this guide helps you walk that path in a practical, accessible, and real way. To learn more, just click on the first link in the description. You don't need to make any big decision now. Just take a look, because sometimes it's in a simple click that the turning point begins. Pain is part of life, but it doesn't have to govern your life. You may have been betrayed, ignored, wronged. You may be in the middle of chaos, silence, a crisis of faith, but you still have value. You still have a purpose, you still have a path, and Jesus, who went through all this, didn't give up. So please, don't give up either. Continue. Even wounded, even tired, even without strength, continue. Because Jesus' story didn't end on the cross. It continued in the tomb and was reborn on the morning of the third day. And your story can also begin again, now.